Dear students, and welcome to the 13th session of the KIPS Distance Learning Program Current Affairs Newspaper Roundup. Today we are going to discuss three important developments that have taken place in the world. First of all, we are going to talk about developments in the Afghan peace process with a sort of reconciliation on the cards between the Afghan government and the Pakistan administration. Second of all, we are going to see what are the economic impacts of the global COVID-19 pandemic, and what are its impacts on the global oil industry, and what we can hope for the future, and what kind of implications will all of this have on the coming years. On a third level, we're going to discuss what this economic impact is already being observed in Pakistan, and what will be the impacts of the global drop in oil prices, and what prospects does all of this hold for Pakistan's economy. So first of all, recently, there was a detailed dialogue between the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, and the newly instituted Foreign Minister of the Afghan government. And now this is an important development because this shows that there has been some form of conciliation and background under the table talks going on between the Pakistan administration and the Afghan government, which have not happened to a large scale in recent years because there was a mutual trust deficit between the Pakistan government and the Afghan government. The primary reason for that is that the Pakistan administration and Pakistani state has never really considered the Afghan government as a legitimate political group and a political stakeholder within the Afghan quagmire. Pakistan has always sponsored and supported the Taliban claim for legitimacy and political relevance in Afghan politics, which is why the Afghan government has always looked upon Pakistan with a sort of mistrust and a lack of vision and a lack of ability to cooperate. So the idea that there was high level dialogue between the two administration shows that there is greater consensus within the Pakistan administration that they must change their Afghan policy from the strategic depth doctrine on towards a comprehensive cooperative engagement within the Afghan quagmire involving all stakeholders, because it is high time that Pakistan changes its ideology and its foreign policy narrative within Afghanistan, which is something that a lot of other experts on foreign policy have already pointed out and suggested the Pakistani government to do, because its original strategy and foreign policy doctrine towards Afghanistan, which is named as the strategic depth doctrine, is too myopic in its scope and only considers the Taliban as the legitimate and important power brokers, while negating all of the other, especially the Afghan government, which is one of the main reasons why the Afghan government has never really warmed up to Pakistan to a large extent. However, all of that seems to be changing, because the momentum that the Afghan peace process gathered in recent months was very promising, and that momentum and success for a peace process required Pakistan to warm up to the Afghan government as well, because essentially an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned intra-Afghan dialogue requires Pakistani support above everything, because it was Pakistan that convinced the Taliban to come onto the negotiation table and agree to American demands in the peace process in the first place. And once again, perhaps Pakistan will play its important role in convincing the Taliban to cutting out a fair deal with the Afghan government in a post-American withdrawal scenario. So, in recent months, we have also seen other initiatives by the Pakistan administration, by the Pakistan state, in order to ease up its relations with the Afghan government and to build reconciliation and trust building measures. For example, the opening up of Torkham and Chavan borders on a 24/7 basis before the COVID-19 lockdown, and the nearly $200 million increase in Afghan Pakistan trade, and increasing people to people contact between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and more Afghani students into Pakistani universities. All of these measures were important confidence building measures that were required at the time. Furthermore, the foreign ministers also discussed the revival of the Afghan-Pakistan Action Plan for Peace and Solidarity that was originally envisioned in 2018, because that is required in order to build the kind of trust and confidence that is required for Pakistan to help the Afghan government and the Taliban to engage with each other constructively and perhaps have a long-term solution to the Afghan crisis. Now, all of this is coming in the backdrop of the global pandemic of COVID-19. So this adds more emergency to the Afghan peace process, because I hope and I think that all sides realize that all of the people that are cooped up within the Afghan, quagmire, especially all the prisoners of Afghan Taliban and the Afghan government, are under immediate threat of contracting the COVID-19 virus, and it could have a major breakout in Afghanistan, which is going to be catastrophic for Afghan society because they don't really have any healthcare systems or infrastructure in place to deal with such level of a crisis. So to avoid all of that, despite global efforts and global attentions toward curbing the COVID-19 crisis, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and to an extent the US administration as well are still paying significant attention to the Afghan peace process because everybody wants this to be done and dusted with, as was rightly pointed out in the recently passed United Nations Security Council resolution supporting the 29th February peace agreement for the withdrawal of American troops and following intra-Afghan dialogue with America and the Taliban. So those are important developments in the Afghan peace process, right? So now let's talk about the global economic crisis that is about to happen perhaps because of the global lockdown and emergency measures to contain the COVID-19 breakouts. So yesterday, oil prices globally, they really slumped. They saw a downturn, a break in their prices that was historic, never before recorded, to the extent that in the United States, the producers of oil did not have any space to store the extra oil that they were extracting, which is why they were paying other storage people and other, part of the chain of the oil industry to take their oil from them. So oil basically sold at minus $37.5 a barrel instead of 25, 30 or 40 dollar per barrel. That was the original rate before the COVID-19 crisis kicked in. So this is a very damning scenario for the oil industry and for global manufacturing as well, because global manufacturing primarily depends upon the oil industry and the usage of oil in order to run its machinery and pay its wages, right? So this means that, and this is especially in the backdrop of the already damning impact of an OPEC led by Saudi Arabia and Russia price war and oil war over the control of maximum share of the oil market in the world. Now we know that crisis really evolved and sustained for a few months before OPEC led by Saudi Arabia and Russia group agreed to a reduction in the production of oil by 10 million barrels. But the time period that was before that agreement happened, the suspension of any agreement on oil by the greatest oil producing countries had a damning impact on the oil industry because prices plunged substantially. And we saw the impact of that in Pakistan as well, because our oil prices were cut by nearly 15 rupees per litre by the government. So even though the agreement was reached between Saudi Arabia and Russia after a lot of wrangling and a lot of arm twisting by each other in order to ensure that the maximum market share goes to one of them, the agreement did not have the kind of impact that was envisioned by the parties that signed that agreement, which is Saudi Arabia, OPEC countries and Russia, because oil prices did not substantially increase after the agreement was reached. And immediately after the agreement, the global COVID-19 pandemic really emerged as the single biggest threat to global oil industry. So in the price war and the oil war that was happening between Saudi Arabia and Russia, you must realize that Saudi Arabia was set to lose that game from the very beginning. Why? Because Saudi Arabian economy is almost exclusively dependent upon its oil industry and upon its oil exports. Nearly 80% of its yearly budget comes from oil exports. Whereas Russia is not an oil dependent economy, it has other sectors, manufacturing, which are controlled by its oligarchs, and it's a huge economy. So Russia could sustain the impacts of continued and sustained oil price wars between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And that is something that happened between Saudi Arabia, because in the end it was Saudi Arabia that caved into the pressure of increasing economic damage and financial loss due to the price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. And that was also reflected in the entire Gulf region, because a lot of other countries in the Gulf region, including Bahrain, UAE, Qatar, sold a lot of their government bonds up to $10 billion in order to raise funding for their financial budgets and for their financial books, because the amount of loss that was incurring from the oil price war between Saudi Arabia, OPEC and Russia was too much of a burden upon their economies. And now with the global pandemic, we must realize that the oil industry will have probably the worst year or a few years ever in its history, ever since the oil was discovered. Now, if we look at the breakdown of the oil that is used in the world according to industry, the most amount of oil, the greatest share, goes to the air transport industry, second to the naval or the sea transport industry, third to power production around the world, and fourth to land transport, which includes cars and all other means of transportation on land and road. So since the three most important parts of that oil consumption industries, which is the air industry, naval industry and the land-based transport industry, have virtually come to a standstill, global oil demand has reduced to nearly 5%. So the demand that was before the global COVID-19 pandemic, now it has reduced to 5% of its original demand. That is a substantial cut in its demand and its supply, which is why globally oil producing companies and the oil industry is extracting more and more oil, but there are no buyers for that oil, which is why they have to store it away, but they have also run out of places to store away that oil. So I read an interesting tweet today. That tweet was about the idea that since the oil industry is completely running out of places to store the oil that they are extracting, perhaps we should leave it in the ground forever. And that is very important, because one of the important things that the COVID-19 crisis has taught us is that if we halt our economic activities, our pollution producing activities, our climate changing, global warming activities, it would take a few weeks before this earth really starts to heal itself, before nature returns, before the air is clean, before the water is clean. And that is something that each of us deserve to have in a world, because we were born in a world that no human has sovereignty over. It belongs to the one who created it. And we have every right to enjoy all the riches of this earth. And we have the responsibility, according to the golden rule, that we must give the earth to our future generation better than we inherited it. And perhaps, but I doubt that once the COVID-19 goes away and once again economic activity starts, all of the measures, accidental and emergency measures that have allowed the earth to heal in the past few weeks will go back and in the reverse, and climate change and global warming will once again become as damning as it was before the COVID-19 crisis. But let's hope some things change, and let's hope that we can build a more greener and a more environmentally friendly future together. Now, furthermore, due to the economic fallout of the global pandemic, there is increasing pressure upon governments from Washington to Berlin to Madrid in Spain and many other countries to ease the lockdown, because people are suffering economic impacts and their wages have virtually gone down to zero, and they are frustrated and stressed because of the global pandemic and the continuous weeks-long lockdown, and they are now protesting on streets, completely giving caution to the wind of containing themselves and practicing quarantine and lockdown. The IMF predicts that the global economic impact of this pandemic is going to be either equivalent or even greater than the Great Depression of the 1930s that plunged the world into a deep economic crisis that led to the rise of Nazism and Hitler in Germany, which caused the World War II. So let's hope that the global economic crisis that we are facing now does not lead to any radical rise of right-wing extremist and violent ideologies and parties around the world, which is something that we have actually already observed in a number of cases in Europe and in the case of America as well. An interesting article on that was written by Maliha Lodhi, our former permanent representative of the United Nations, in Dawn newspaper. I will share that with you. Do read it. It's about how authoritarian regimes around the world are only being strengthened by the global coronavirus pandemic, and they are denting further and undermining further multilateral efforts and global cooperation on key collective issues. Now let's talk about the impact of the global economic crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing lockdown on the economy of Pakistan. So the global dramatic reduction in oil prices can be a blessing in disguise for Pakistan. I think, and experts agree that nearly 25 to 30% benefit will come to us, not more than that. Why? Because even though our import bill will be reduced, which is good for our current account and our trade deficit, because we import 80% of the oil that we utilize here, and 14% of our total import bill, actually 15, is composed of our oil that we import. So a reduction, a big reduction will be seen in our import bill, which might bring our trade deficit down, and that's a good thing because that will put lesser pressure on our current account deficit and on our foreign exchange reserves, and that will result in more space for the government to economically stabilize itself and to provide economic and financial relief to the masses of Pakistan. So, however, on the same end, due to a dramatic reduction in oil prices around the world, the revenue that the government will collect from oil, well, in theory should increase, but in reality it will not, because even though the prices have reduced and the government might be able to collect more revenue on per liter, but the consumption of oil has dramatically reduced. So the revenue collected by the government will also probably substantially reduce. But the trade deficit will definitely reduce, and that will reduce the burden on our debt reduction. Actually, as a matter of fact, I do have one good news. IMF recently predicted that in 5 years' time, Pakistan's total debt, which is today stands at 94% of our GDP, which means that our debt to GDP ratio is 94%, and virtually our entire economy is on debt, will reduce in 5 years to 70%. This is IMF projection, which is a very positive sort of development for Pakistan's future. However, at the same end, Pakistan's economy will contract by 1.7% GDP negative growth rate for the first time since 1953. We have not seen a negative growth rate since 1953. This is the first time after that, which means that our economy will contract by 1.7%, just as the global economy might contract, IMF and World Bank predict, by more than 3% of its total valuation, which is substantially more than it contracted after the 2018 global financial crisis. Besides that, the G20 summit that was recently held to provide debt relief to the developing countries had its momentum in Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan's pleas as well. He led the effort by the developing world, the global south, to convince the developed world, the rich countries, to provide the developing countries debt relief and economic relief in order to help those countries cope with the substantial economic fallout of the lockdown and the COVID-19 crisis. At the same time, that means that Pakistan will have, and in the total amount of debt relief that will be provided in the coming months by the developing countries, by G20 to the developing world, is going to be roughly in the area of $60 billion. Out of that, $20 million alone, will be provided by Saudi Arabia in deferred oil payments, which means that it will not request the developing countries to pay their oil bills to Saudi Arabia right away, and might give them a year or 2 years relief in that sense. So that means that Saudi Arabia will give Pakistan $1.5 billion relief. Besides that, the IMF has already given $1.4 billion relief. We will also get additional funding from other multilateral institutions such as the World Bank of $400 million. So this combined relief, economic financial relief that Pakistan's economy will get in the short term, in the next 6 months, is going to be in the area of $6 to $8 billion, which is a substantial amount by Pakistani standards, and will provide significant fiscal space to Pakistan to really bring our country